Corporation Productive Selling Conference, I'd like to spend a little bit of time to try to give you sort of a mindset, if you will, on what you should be projecting when you're in front of a prospective customer. Because I'm a big believer, and I think many of you would agree, that when you're in front of a customer, he can kind of tell how you feel. I'm sure that you've been in situations where somebody was overly confident and you could tell they were overly confident, or they had a lack of confidence and you could tell that, or they weren't feeling well and you could tell that. You can kind of sense when there's something wrong. And I think that if you get into a selling situation, you can have all the skills in the world, and we're going to talk a lot about selling skills today. You can have all the ability in the world, you can have all the delivery in the world. If you don't feel right inside, if you don't have the proper attitude, it comes across to the customer. And so you go through a presentation one day and you say, gee, I did everything right, and the result came out wrong. Well, I'm a big believer that we measure all activity by result. And so if the result came out wrong, there was something wrong there between you and the customer. And many times, if you haven't given a great deal of thought to your attitude, you'll find that the problem lays in the way you think or what you thought before you got there. Now, to kind of get going and involved in this mindset thing, I'd like you to think for a second, if you would, and I'll give you what the number one answer is to this in a minute. What's the purpose of a business? Thinking in terms of a business, if you're going to go into a business, what do you think the purpose of a business is, Greg?
Well, to generate a bottom line profit.
That's the number one answer. You've got the number one answer. Any other answers?
To provide service.
Serve the customer. Bingo. That's number two answer, okay? I told this to a group of people one time a couple of years ago, and several of them had been in business for themselves, and when I gave him what the answer was, he said, thank goodness I've been doing pretty well. The purpose of a business, the only reason any business ever did go into business is not to make money. I use the example in our little business park over in Irvine. There's a sandwich shop that has moved in among all these other high-tech businesses that are in our area. The sandwich shop, if they went into business to make money, would fail. They had to go into business for another reason. Now, you said serve the customer. That's very, very close. You go into business to solve a problem. If there's no problem, you don't have a business. And so the purpose of a business is not to make money, but to solve a problem. You see, if you don't have that perspective, then what you run into is a projection of, Mr. Customer, the reason I'm here today is to make a little money. Let's get started. Now, that's very easy to do when you're in a selling business where you get compensated for the amount of business that you do. It's very easy to relate to that. And what you're out here trying to do today is to make a little money because, you know, the rent's due, or the car payment's due, or you want to go buy a new boat, or you want to go buy a new suit, or you want to take a vacation to Honolulu, or whatever it is you want to do. Now, I would agree with you that the objective of a business, and therefore your objective, is to make money. That's why you decided to come to work for us. We provide an opportunity for you to get a good return, dollar return, for your invested time. And that's why you got involved in this program. But I submit to you, unless you get this out of your head, you're going to, from time to time, project that to the customer. That's why salespeople that are broke have a hard time selling, because that comes across to the customer. It comes across to the customer that this guy is here for his own selfish reasons, and so therefore I need to be guarded. I need to protect myself. That's where all that sales resistance comes from. Now, sales resistance is natural. We're going to talk about sales resistance today. It's natural for you to resist my ideas. That's why when we talk about selling, I think selling is a way overused word. We're really talking about motivation. And there are 4 central theories to motivation. if we've got our mindset here that our objective is to solve a problem, then when you sit down in front of that customer, you've got a whole different program you're presenting. My reason for being here today, Mr. Prospect, is to see if I can help you solve some of the problems that you have in operating your business. Now, let's relate that to the product we're in. What's the problem we're trying to solve? Communication. But where's that communication going to happen?
Productivity.
We're trying to solve a productivity problem. They're less productive because they are unable to communicate, right? Now, what have been the attempts to solve this problem? What's the proof that there is a problem? The proof that there's a problem is that there are pay telephones. Somebody needs the ability to communicate when they're away from their business or away from their office or away from their home. Another proof, there are beepers. Huge systems have been developed so people can be notified if somebody wants to get in touch with them. You know, the prime example for that is the medical profession. You know, I was on the golf course a couple of weeks ago, and in the foursome ahead of us, there was a guy that was a doctor. His beeper went off, 17th hole, he heads for the clubhouse. It's all over for him. Now they've gone to digital and alphanumeric beepers, so you can tell who's even calling you. All right? The old IMTS telephone that we talked a little bit about yesterday. Two-way radio. What else? What else goes in cars? There's one other thing. I haven't named it. It's the most common thing that people have in their cars today. Truckers use it all the time. CB radio. All right? Those things are the proof that there's a problem out there. Now, what we have done is we've brought to the marketplace a new product that we believe solves this problem better than any of the other products out there. Now, there are certain problems that two-way radio are necessary to solve because the expense of this might be too great for a company, for instance, that needs to communicate among themselves, but they don't need to get into the telephone system. So, the mindset that I want you to have right now and for the rest of the day is that we are in this business. You're in the selling profession. You're going to learn everything you can about persuasion and motivation today so that you can go out there and solve a problem for the customer. Now, that's not as easy as it sounds, but we have to have that mindset at the start. We have a situation where we're going to talk about the 4 central theories of motivation in selling. Now, you say, why are there only 4 central theories? Why are there 4 theories at all? Why isn't there 1 theory? Well, the reason is because selling has not become a science yet. In the 1970s, in my training classes, I often said that I think in the 1980s, we're going to see the science of the mind. We're really going to learn what the mind can do and what the power of the mind is, and we're going to learn more about how to use our mind skills to run our businesses. Less brawn and more mind skills. This is kind of a breakdown of that. The 4 central theories come from the theories that companies today use in teaching their people how to motivate, how to manage, how to motivate, all the things that are necessary in running a business. What we're going to do is we're going to cover the 4 central theories, and then we're going to meld these 4 theories together. We're going to take the 4 theories and we're going to put them together like this, and we're going to say, what's missing from each theory? What does each theory contribute that maybe the other theory doesn't contribute? And when we bring them all together on the board and we bring them to the bottom, we're going to use this to structure our presentation. So what you're going to do today is you're going to take a look at these theories and you're going to say, how am I going to use this to structure my presentation? How am I going to put my presentation together in such a way that it is most persuasive and allows me the best return for my invested time? And then we'll put names on those portions of the presentation. So we can say, how did we do in this portion? We put a name on it. We break it down, in other words, to the lowest common denominator. It becomes much easier if you break it down to the lowest common denominator. Okay, let's get started. What are the 4 central theories? All right. The first theory, one that has been developed by a fellow by the name of Larry Wilson. Anybody heard of Larry Wilson, Wilson Learning out of Eden Prairie, Minnesota? he put this together in a course that he calls Counselor Selling. And it revolves around the theory of transactional analysis, or TA as it's commonly called, only because not only is this hard to say, it's harder to spell. When I had to put that up there, I had a heck of a time. Had to go to several dictionaries and had to kind of check the dictionary and make sure if the dictionary was right. The transactional analysis theory operates almost opposite of the rest of the theories. The rest of the theories say, here are the things that you must do to get the customer to purchase your product, or that you must do to motivate somebody to do something. The transactional analysis theory says that there are 4 obstacles to the sale. And if you overcome those 4 obstacles, you'll have a sale. Not once in a while, but every time. So if you design your presentation to overcome those 4 obstacles, when you get to the end, it is then just a matter of closing the sale. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about closing the sale later this afternoon. You cannot close a sale unless you've done all the work on the front end. You can't close the sale. Too many people get in and they try to close right away. They're closing all the time. You know, you've heard the theory. I see you shaking your head, Greg. You've probably heard that close early, close often, close late. All right? That's kind of the school I cut my teeth on. Some of the other things they say is how do you learn to close? You know, J. Douglas Edwards is probably one of the premier sales trainers, I think, of our time certainly, and maybe of all time. And J. Douglas Edwards always said you close too early and too often, and that's how you learn to close. Well, you may learn to close that way, but you're not going to close much doing that way, because what you do is you build up the buyer's resistance. Early on, what you have to do is you have to break down the buyer's resistance. Now, I want you to think for a minute, if you will. In the process of having 4 obstacles to overcome, I'm sure you can put your finger on several of the obstacles, but we want to do this in an orderly fashion, because it happens in an orderly fashion. What do you think the first obstacle? I just walked in, Steve, you just met me, you hardly know me, you know why I'm here, you know who I represent because you set an appointment with me. What do you think my first obstacle is? What's my first problem? Anybody got any ideas?
Initial acceptance, breaking the barrier, I would call it.
Okay, I think certainly.
Let down the initial defenses.
I think that's certainly true. I think that comes from the school of selling that says you've got to create rapport. If we can put one word together, what do you think that word is? You had an idea. Let's have your idea. Maybe it'll lead us to the word.
Most people don't like salesmen. They're afraid of salesmen. They're going to sell them something.
I think that's certainly true. You enter as an intruder. All right? It's the same when you meet someone the first time in a social situation. You have to kind of break down those barriers. What's the problem, though, that's in the customer's mind? What is it he needs to learn about you? What is it he needs to, what's the feeling he needs to have about you? That's the first obstacle. Well, I see the brains just whirling here. Everybody's eyes are going left and right. Hey, give this man a Cupid doll. What'd you say? Say that louder. Trust. All right? The first obstacle to the sale, the first problem that you have is that you enter the situation and you have no trust. Now, since that's the first obstacle, and that's what our problem is, I guess we ought to spend some time talking about how do we build trust. We ought to also spend some time talking about how do we destroy trust, so we know we don't do those things, all right? Because too often we do those things. I'll give you a couple of ways that salespeople go in and they break down trust almost immediately. You enter as an expert. You know everything about everything. You're cocky. You're self-assured. You then continue forward to try to manipulate the customer to do what you think is right. You know, an awful lot of selling is done that way. An awful lot of selling is done where you try to manipulate the customer to do what you think is right for him. Actually, what you're doing is you're trying to make some money. And you say, if I can manipulate the customer to buy these products or services, I'll make some money. And we're giving very little thought to the problem of no trust. You don't trust people like that yourself. if you don't trust people like that, how do you expect them to trust you? So you enter as a stranger, as an intruder, and you have to build trust. And that gets a little tough, doesn't it? It's not as easy as it sounds. How are we going to do that? How are we going to build trust? Well, let me get your thinking going the direction of how we build trust. Who do you trust the most in the whole world? I want you to tell me without thinking, who do you trust the most in the whole world? What person?
My mother.
Ha! Number one answer again. This guy's got all the number one answers. The number one answer to that question is my mother. The number one cop-out, by the way, is myself. That's a cop-out. Number two answer is my spouse, my wife, my husband, all right? My dad. Most women say my dad. Why do you trust your mother?
It's always done what's best for
Is she always right? You didn't want to say anything bad about your mother.
Right.
Steve's a real gentleman. She's not always right, but you're right. She won't lie to make you buy, will she? No. She has your best interest at heart. Same thing with your spouse in most cases. They're not going to lie to make you buy. They have your best interest at heart. So therefore, we immediately just found out that if we're going to build trust, we've got to convince this prospect, not that we're his mother, but that we have his best interest at heart. So we got the direction, don't we? We got to convince him of that. Now we got to project something. And the thing we've got to project, and the thing that you want to know about everybody when you meet them, is, are you sensitive to me? Are you sensitive to me and my needs, or are you here for your own selfish reasons? We go right back to our mindset here, don't we? We go right back to what is the reason we're here. And so, if we're going to overcome the barrier of trust, we have to project that we're there to help him. We're there to solve his problem. Now, what are some of the aspects of trust? Why do we do something in selling? Why do we do something called creating rapport? I don't know what that means exactly, because they don't even know how to spell rapport right. You know, they spell it rappaport. I never have figured that out. But why is that, do you suppose? Why do we have a portion of the presentation?
Feel comfortable around you.
That's exactly right. At the end of the first portion of the presentation, we do want them to feel comfortable. First step in them feeling comfortable, by the way, is you feeling comfortable. Once you think about the first lead that you're going to go out on, the first appointment that you're going to go out on here on Monday morning, how comfortable are you going to feel? It's not a comfortable feeling until you get used to it and you've done it a whole lot. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have a system by which you make yourself more comfortable. When you're out, when you're going to go in to see your prospect, you might want to take a minute or two to just kind of relax, maybe listen to some music on the radio on the way out there, get your mind off of it, and thinking in terms of, when I go in, I have to be relaxed, because if I'm not relaxed, he won't be relaxed. Now, there's a word that describes the most important aspect in building trust. All right? And I'm sure you'll have no trouble coming up with the word when I give you some examples. If you're Catholic and I'm Protestant, less trust. You're black, I'm white, less trust. You're a golfer, I'm a fisherman, less trust. I mean, golfers, they chase a little white ball around, they go out there and pay a whole bunch of money, they walk around, they lose their ball, they lose their tempers. I mean, come on, that's recreation? And the golfer says, fishing? You get up early in the morning, you go out there, it's cold and damp, you know, you stick little slimy things on little metal things, and you try to hook other little slimy things and pull them out of the water, and I mean, come on. That's recreation? Think about that for a minute. Two golfers meet. You play golf? Oh yeah, I play golf. Where do you play? You ever played Kapalua in Hawaii? Oh yeah. I'm a member over at, oh yeah? Really? No kidding? I know. What do we got going? We've got something going for us, don't we? Yeah. We've got something called commonality. So if we're going to build trust, I guess one of the things we want to try to do is we want to try to establish some areas of commonality. How are you going to do that? Ask questions. That's an excellent way to find out something. Sometimes that can come across up front as a little bit prying. What could we do before we ask the question to make sure we ask the right question?
Observe the office. You could have a trophy or a picture.
Observe the office. There may be something in there that he's extremely proud of. Actually, if he displays it in his office, he probably is proud of it. You know, sometimes there's unusual things in people's office. They've got something on their desk and you really don't even understand what it is. And the reason they've got it there is they want people to ask questions about it. Let me make sure that I get this solidly entrenched in your mind, because I talked to a sales trainer about a year and a half ago, and he said, businessmen don't like small talk. Get right in there and get going with your business. Start talking about business. And I said, wait a minute. Have you ever been in a large office and watched the area where there's a coffee pot or a water cooler, or watched the hallways? People are constantly looking for an opportunity to relieve the tension of the business world by talking about something other than that. Now, I'll grant you there are certain times when people are extremely busy, but if they're extremely busy and you can't get them to spend some time with you building a trust environment, then why go on? You know, I had a sort of a mentor in my early days in sales. I've been doing this for about 25 years now. I hate to tell you that because it kind of dates me. My mentor, his name was Orla Coakley. Great name, isn't it? With a name like Orla Coakley, how can you not succeed? Orla told me when I was a young salesman, 22 years old, he said, John, people don't buy from people they don't like, and they don't buy from people they don't know. So if you reverse that now, they got to get to know you and like you, or they're not going to buy from you. Plain and simple. They may have an extreme need for the product. They may want it. They may desire it. They may have all the other characteristics, but they don't like you, they don't know you, they're not going to buy from you. So this must be one of the most important characteristics of the sale. Building commonality. Now, I think you've got the idea going here on what are some of the things that you can do to build trust. It's called relating, by the way. And in relating, there has to be a discussion going on, doesn't there? There has to be a dialogue going on. You have to be careful that it doesn't become a monologue, either by him or by you. There has to be an interchange going on, and there has to be some relationship going on. Now, you do need some skills in this area. If you're going to do this, you need some skills. And the skills you need happen to be listening skills. As you'll see when I pull that page off, listening persuades. Too often, this is the single skill that salespeople have the least of. And you all know you like a good listener, don't you? Isn't it great if you get a good listener? Most of us aren't real fond of good talkers. Good talkers that don't have listening skills continually interrupt us. They don't listen to us either. There's a way that people listen. There's a way that you're listening here today. There are stages to listening. All right? The first stage happens to be, and all listening you hear, all right? The first stage happens to be that you hear, but it's words only. It's just noise. You aren't connecting it to thoughts. You aren't even connecting it to sentences. When that happens is when you're stimulated to think about something else while I'm talking. All right? Maybe you just thought about, oh, I got an appointment at such and such a time, and that thought flashed through your mind. At the time that thought flashed through your mind, you were just hearing my words. You weren't connecting it into sentences, and you really weren't getting anything out of it. Now, you can look at somebody. You can look them in the face, and you can tell kind of what stage of listening they're at. Now, to really know where they're at and to get them into the deeper stages of listening, you have to ask questions. Again, you have to have some questioning skills. The second level is the words become sentences. But he doesn't connect it to ideas yet. He ties all those words together. He hears the sentence. He's getting some understanding here that there's a communication going on, but he doesn't tie it to a lot of ideas. He's not thinking down the road here based upon what you say. You're not creating anything yet. The next level is that he now understands and he connects to ideas. Hopefully I've got you that far this morning. Hopefully I've got you to the point where you're understanding and you're beginning to connect this to ideas. You're starting to think, starting to get your... Now, once you start to think, once you start to connect that to ideas, then you understand, move this down here, and you evaluate. Now you're actually, and I can see it in some of you, it's kind of coming down to the point where I'm starting to evaluate what he's saying. Do I agree? Do I disagree? Is it logical? Does it make sense? Is it illogical? Why is he telling me this? Why is he saying this to me? You know, that gets over into some other skills of listening, but once you're at that point, you're making some progress. Now, if you're doing the thing right at this point, you're going down the road in the psychology of motivation and you're making some headway. And the very last thing that happens is he understands, let's move this down here, all right? He evaluates and he creates. A new thought is created. He's going down the road to accepting what you're saying when he starts creating off of your ideas. And you want to get him to the point where he starts saying, gee, I never thought about it that way before. You know, at the outset, I love customers who are not interested. And as a matter of fact, are even prejudiced against my product. Because it's really thrilling when you get him to the point where you can see it in his eyes. He's saying to himself, I never thought about it like that before. Gee, maybe I should investigate this a little bit further. You know, that's the secret to our marketing system. The secret to our marketing system is that our salespeople have the ability to go out there and talk to people who at the outset are not interested in the product and may even be prejudiced against it. You know, the guy says, I don't want to get calls in my car. It's the only place I get to escape the telephone. And get him to say, you know, I never thought about it that way before. That's interesting. And they're taking it that direction. And as he continues to take it that direction, and you get into cost justification and all of the other things, you've now created a sale. And you've created a sale because you are a good listener. You are connecting his words, sentences, understanding his ideas, evaluating, and creating from what he tells you, and you're getting that in return. Let's pull this off of here, and let's take and talk a little bit about what are the listening skills. Other than that's how you listen, what really are the listening skills? Well, back again to, you know, the first time I try to convince somebody that listening persuades, they kind of go, huh? You sit there and listen to somebody, and by the way you listen, you're persuading? Well, clinical psychologists will tell you that you can lead somebody in the direction that you want them to go by listening these three ways: empathic listening, selective listening, and responsive listening. Now, what does that mean? What are all those? Empathic comes from the word empathy, all right, which says that you're listening, you're suggesting, you're counseling. Webster says in the dictionary that empathic means that you're sharing thoughts and feelings. You have to have a capacity to be able to share thoughts and feelings. Now, I'm not trying to turn you all into clinical psychologists, but I am telling you that there are certain skills necessary to selling a product and doing it successfully, or marketing a product, or motivating somebody, that if you don't have them, you're just another salesperson on the street. You know, most salespeople are good presenters. I've not met many salespeople in my lifetime, and I've met a ton of them, I can tell you that, in the last 25 years, that aren't good presenters. I mean, all I got to do is say, give me your presentation, and they get right into it. They can present. They can get that thing going. That's not selling. That is such a small portion of what happens in the motivational aspects of selling that we have to get a clear understanding of what all this means. We listen empathically means that when I'm listening to you, I'm really listening to you. I'm paying attention to what you're saying. I'm responding. Next step down, responsive listening. Verbal and nonverbal acknowledgement of what you're saying. Selective listening, I think, is terribly important for salespeople. That's where you say to yourself, why is he telling me this? What's his motive? Is he trying to slow me down? Is he trying to stop me? Is he trying to throw me off track? Is he trying to convince me he doesn't have a problem in this area? Is he being with me? Is it basically just sales resistance that I'm running into here? Or is it some real stuff? Is it coming from his gut? Is it coming from inside of him? Or is it just coming out of his mouth? That's selective listening. Selective listening means you don't get sold. You see, and people have said this is a trite phrase, people hear what they want to hear. You say one thing, he hears another. Works with your kids all the time. Can I have the car tonight, Dad? Maybe. That means yes. All right. Absolutely not. That means yes. All I got to do is bear down on you a little bit more, give you a few more reasons. Kids are the best salespeople in the world. You know why? Do you know why kids will press on in that kind of a situation? You must have children that are old enough to drive a car. Why do they press on in that situation where sometimes salespeople back off? Why do you think?
Well, they know there's a soft spot that if they keep after it, they'll get what they want.
They absolutely know that. What does that soft spot mean? When you tell them they can't have the car, how do they feel? When a salesman hears a no, how does he feel? What's that word that they call that, you know? Well, you ask somebody for a date and they turn you down. What do you feel? Rejection. All right? The reason they press on is they know you love them. The reason salesmen quit too soon is you're not too sure and you want everybody. I'm not too sure this prospect cares a whole lot for me, so I back off too easy. Something you can't let bother you. You can't take, you've heard this, those of you who've been selling for a while, you can't take rejection personally. You didn't reject personally. Rejected your product. You rejected your service. He rejected your offer, maybe even. Your offer wasn't just right. Or maybe it's just sales resistance. Why do we make this thing so tough, huh? Why does it have to be so tough? You do this, you do a little bit of this all the time. All right? You respond, verbal, nonverbal. All nonverbal expressions, right? If you're a professional motivator, you know how to do those things well. You do it with your eyes. All these things work for you. Verbal, really? I'll be darned. No kidding. That's interesting. I didn't know that. Why do you feel that way? Tell me more. Those are the skills we need. If we're going to make listening persuasive. Now, what are some of the other things you can do to build trust? Let's talk about a few of the things that we've heard a lot about in our selling careers. What have you heard about eye contact? Maintain eye contact. That's what you've heard about that, isn't it? Look them in the eye. I'll give you some help here today. Don't use eye contact. Let me show you why. How comfortable are you right now while I'm talking to you? You don't have any idea what's going on between you and I, because you know in the animal world that what happens, don't you? Two animals get together, they make eye contact, neither one of them back down, what happens? Fight. By looking them in the eye, you're building fight. It's uncomfortable as heck. Now let me back away from the group, and I can be talking to you, and you will not be uncomfortable, Mike, as long as I'm talking to you like this, and I want you to see what happens the second I fix my stare on you and I start looking you in the eye. Yeah, you look away. I've made you uncomfortable. You know when you make eye contact? When you ask a closing question. It's something, again, the psychologists call cognitive dissonance. You're trying to create cognitive dissonance. And so you use everything you can to do that. You use your verbal skills, you use your nonverbal skills, you look them in the eye, but when you're presenting, and certainly up front, you look at their face. You can't tell where I'm looking. I wish I could do this to the camera for the people that are watching this on video, because you can really feel it, can't you? All of a sudden, and I notice almost every one of you, and you're all pretty good at eye contact, when I fix my eyes on yours, they go this way or they blink a little bit. It's uncomfortable for you. Well, you don't want to make them uncomfortable. You're trying to build trust. How are you going to build trust by making people feel uncomfortable? So you have to get in there and you have to use your nonverbal skills and you have to look at something besides direct eye contact. Physical action, one of the most important parts of building trust. Let me give you a couple of stories along these lines. Back in the 1920s, there was something called the Hawthorne Study. And it happened right here in the Los Angeles area at one of the GE plants where they were making lighting. And they decided that they would see if they could motivate the people to be more productive in the plant. And so what they did was they improved working conditions. They went down, they improved the lighting. Sure enough, productivity went up. All right? Then they improved the acoustics. Sure enough, productivity went up. It didn't seem to matter what they did as long as they improved, productivity went up. They said, oh, we're motivating these people, aren't we? All you got to do is improve working conditions and they're motivated. So they said, well, now to make it scientific, we'll have to start removing these things and see if productivity goes back down. And so they started to remove them. And they removed the quality of lighting. And they changed the acoustics back to the old acoustics. And productivity went up still further. Bet you didn't think I was going to tell you that, did you? Why do you suppose that is? Here are these people doing what they believe to be relatively insignificant work down on an assembly line, and all of a sudden these high-powered executives are down there with clipboards and stopwatches, not hassling them, not poking them to do better, just watching them. They must be very interested in what we're doing. What we're doing must be very important. And here, by the way, are the two key words in any relationship in the human world today, and I think maybe in the animal world too. They came to feel somebody cares. That's what your prospect wants to know if he's going to trust you. He wants to know, do you care about me? Somebody cares. Well, these folks learned a lot about the art of motivation and how do you motivate employees. I think we can take a page from that book and learn something from that. Want you to, let's see, who am I going to pick on here? Let me pick on Alan for a minute. Alan, what I want you to do is I want you to, knowing that you represent Cellular Communications Corporation, all right, and you're in the communications business, mobile communications business, knowing that you have an appointment with me, and my name is John Thompson, I want you to now stand up, if you would, as if you were walking into my office, and introduce yourself to me.
Good morning, John. My name is Alan Wilson, Cellular Communications Corporation.
Okay? Not too bad. I've heard a lot worse. Go ahead. Thanks, Alan. Not too bad. There's something in transactional analysis called stroking. How many of you read the book, I'm Okay, You're Okay? Anybody? Got one. Games people play. How many have heard of them? Games people play, I'm okay, you're okay. That's transactional analysis. All right? In transactional analysis, in this theory of selling, if you will, they say stroking is very important. Let me give you an example of stroking. I walk in the morning, and Mary's walking down the hallway the other way, and I'm headed up the hall, and she says, "Good morning, Mr. Thompson. Fine day, isn't it?" And I say, "Good morning," and walk on by. She's saying, "What's wrong with him?" Well, what just happened? She gave me 3 strokes. I gave her 1 back. Something doesn't work here. If you read I'm Okay, You're Okay, or games people play, you have a very clear understanding of the importance of stroking in the human relationship. Now, I had a doctor of psychology work for me in selling one time, and he told me, and he was convinced of this, that the sale is made in the first 12 seconds. Now, I was never convinced of that, but he did convince me that the first 12 seconds is pretty important. So I said, I better give some thought to that. I better give some thought to what happens in the first 12 seconds. Well, what happens in the first 12 seconds is introduction, right? That's about all you can get done in the first 12 seconds. Then I got to thinking back a few years ago. We were working on a script for selling on the telephone, and one of our problems was we weren't getting to tell our story to enough people. In other words, the problem was people would hang up before we got to get into our presentation. So we said, well, how are we going to structure this thing so they listen to us until we get to that point? And we tested several types of scripts. And from that, and from the idea of stroking, I think that we have developed a great introduction. Now, before I give you that introduction, let's think about this, what he said for a minute, and then I want to talk a little bit about physical action. What did he say in his introduction? He said, "Good morning," didn't he? I believe he did. That was a stroke. He said, "John," didn't he? That's a stroke. He said my name, that's a stroke. And then he said, "I'm," he gave me his name, right? And name of the company. We're even, aren't we? Stroked himself twice, stroked me once. Not too bad. Most introductions go like this. "Hi, my name is John Thompson with Cellular Communications Corporation. How are you today?" I got 2, gave myself 2, gave you 1. Doesn't work. Doesn't feel good. This is feel good over here. We want it to feel good. I'm okay, you're okay. Now, let me show you what we learned in this telephone conversation, and people quit hanging up on us. We started to get our story across. I'm going to have to pick somebody because that last name is a tough one, Greg. Steve Simmons? Siemens. Okay, Steve Siemens, that's not too tough. Let me show you, Steve, how I would introduce myself to you to give the proper amount of stroking to get a feel-good experience. All right? Plus, I've done a number of other things that you'll see in this introduction. I walk into your office, and at some point, you may be sitting, and I see what you would do. It's natural he would stand up. I stop, though, before I come too close, because I don't want to invade your space right away, and I say, "Mr. Siemens?"
Yeah.
Mr. Steve Siemens?
That's correct.
Mr. Siemens, my name is John Thompson with Cellular Communications. How are you today?
Great, thank you.
Count the strokes. Now, I've done a number of things. I've identified him, too, who he is. I've made him feel pretty important. I've recognized his name. I know who he is because it's on my appointment sheet. And if I didn't know that, I'd ask the receptionist his first name. All right? I'd also ask the receptionist some other things about you. All right? Count the strokes. Mr. Siemens? Steve Siemens? That's 2. Mr. Siemens? 3. My name is 1. With, I got to do that. He doesn't care, by the way, but I've got to do that because it's common courtesy. With Cellular Communications Corporation. 2. How are you today? 4 here, 2 here. I'm okay, you're okay. We're feeling pretty good. I gave you more strokes than you gave me. Now, what else did I do that may be considered a stroke? Yeah, I did this. Boy, good handshakes in this group. Good handshakes in this group. Great handshakes in this group. Let me do this. Uh-oh, what happened? I screwed up your handshake, didn't I? Let me tell you how important the handshake is, all right? Great handshakes all the way across. Let me give you one. Oh, I just screwed up your handshake, didn't I? The reason you all had great handshakes is because I got a great handshake and I gave you one. You got to be prepared for the guy who doesn't, because handshake is very important. Let me tell you about another story. New York City. They decided to do, this is a good place to do a study like this, by the way. They decided to do a study where they had a lady leave some change in a phone booth and then stand outside the phone booth until somebody came up and went in. When they went in, they came back out. She said, "Did you find my change? I left my change in there." 80% of the respondents did not reveal to her. They took the change out and put it in their pocket. 80% of the respondents. They said, "There must be a lot of lousy people in New York." Now let me show you something. They changed the study. And when the person came out of the phone booth, whether it was a man or a woman, when they stepped out of the phone booth, she said, "I left my change in there. Did you find it?" She either touched their shoulder or their arm. All right, but she touched them. She made physical contact with them. Just that lightly. 80% of the respondents gave her her money back. How important is physical touch? Extremely important. Psychologists tell us from the time the baby comes out of the womb that his personality develops based upon the physical stroking that he gets. The handshake is very, very important. I'm going to try to give you another bad handshake, and I want you to see how easy it is to get a good one. Here I come. I'm giving you the same bad handshake. Aha, you got in there, didn't you? You got to get that contact in there. You have to pay attention to that handshake. I'll guarantee you right now that 10% of the handshakes you've had in your lifetime have been bad. Maybe 20, 30, 40, 50, depending upon how good you are at it or the people you meet. You're off on the wrong foot. Something doesn't feel right. Can you remember the last time you had a bad handshake? What did it feel like? It feels the same way to him. Yeah, it feels the same way to him. The other thing that'll happen is he'll get your fingers. He'll close too quickly. He'll get your fingers, and that's worse yet. Now you gave him a bad handshake. He tried for a good one. He got a good grip. You didn't. So the first 12 seconds, what are you going to do? What's the first thing you're going to do? Yeah? How are you going to stroke? What's the way you're going to stroke him? Call him by name. Call him by name. Call him by name 2 or 3 times. Then step forward and shake his hand. Introduce yourself and ask him a question that strokes him. How are you today? Pleased to meet you. Social situations, nice to make your acquaintance. So happy to meet you. All right, business situations, maybe a little more staid. All right, you get the picture? You're beginning to get the picture here. But there's a lot of skills involved. We're spending a lot of time on trust, aren't we? There's a lot of skills involved in building trust. A lot of physical action, a lot of stroking, a lot of words, a lot of building commonality. You know what you're doing? And somebody said this when we started this out. You're breaking down the relationship tension. Way back to the beginning when we started talking, somebody said, you need to, I think it was Mary, said that you need to get that comfortable feeling. You don't have it because in the beginning there's relationship tension. I meet you, there's relationship tension. You're not sure of my intent is one of the reasons. You're not sure what my reasoning is. And so, if we're going to build trust, what we're going to do is we're going to break down relationship tension. We're going to establish areas of commonality. We're going to be a good listener. We're going to use physical action. We're going to do all the things necessary. Now, I know what you're going to do. On your first appointment, you're going to go out there and fly by the seat of your pants like you've always flown. All right? You're going to want to get to the presentation because that's what you're most comfortable with. Let's get it on, get it on, get it on. This stuff is hard. It's hard to build a relationship. I mean, there are people going to psychologists and psychiatrists every day because they can't build relationships in life. This is some tough stuff we're talking about. You know, we think closing the sale is tough. The reason we think closing the sale is tough is because we don't do our homework over here. We don't get this thing done right. We don't give consideration to the 4 obstacles of the sale, transactional analysis, and the problems we have in developing trust. If I do nothing else today, if you learn nothing else today, if you will work on nothing else today that I talk about, you work on building trust. You figure out a way to make that guy feel good about you and your relationship. A long time ago, in trying to get this perspective across to a sales force I had, I said, I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to pay you $50 commission every time you establish rapport with a customer. Do you think for 1 minute that if I was paying you to establish rapport, that you couldn't establish rapport with every customer you go on? Wouldn't it be rare that you wouldn't have a good rapport? You can do this without me teaching you any of these skills or learning any new skills. If you concentrate on it, if you make this part of your purpose to build trust, and you say, if I do nothing else in here today, I'm going to have that warm feeling. Now, the value of this is, the more you build up, the more time you can spend in the close trying to get him to move forward to do what you want him to do. Because, see, if he doesn't like you yet when you get to the close, you can't press him very hard, can you? You can't ask him a lot of times for the order, can you? You can't question him a lot, can you? No, he's ready to throw you out the door. But if it's your brother or your mother, you can spend forever trying to convince her, you really ought to do this. Here's the reason you ought to do it. And she won't throw you out. It'll take a long time for her to get mad. Think about the child-parent relationship again. It takes a long time in most cases for the parent to get extremely angry. It's because you do your job over here, and it makes the job over here much, much easier. As a matter of fact, if you do this, I will guarantee you that from this day forward, selling will become fun. The rejection won't bother you as much. You won't get as much of it. You'll have a better understanding of it. You'll have more of a relationship with the people that you're talking to. You won't find the same problems coming up. That doesn't mean they're not going to be there. If they weren't going to be there, this is all we'd have to do. Because you see, where we're at now is we're about ready to run into the second problem, aren't we? Let's assume now I've built trust. Let's assume you trust me. What do you think is the second obstacle to the sale? I got you thinking too much about trust. What do you think is the reason that you still don't want to buy from me? You trust me now, you like me, you think I'm okay. By the way, this goes on all through the presentation. It's not all done up front. All right, what you do is you begin to build this up front, and then you develop it as you go on by maintaining the same empathetic relationship until you get over here to the close, and then you're all ego. You know, all this stuff is kind of forgotten. I'm all ego now. What do you think the second obstacle is?
Getting to listen to your presentation.
You've really stepped down to, it's interesting, you've stepped down to they cover some points here in the second theory, which is the AIDA theory. I think that certainly is a problem to get him to listen. But if you were to put it to one word again, no trust, you got no what now?
How about need?
Yeah, that's the thing we talk most about in selling, don't we? Yeah, I trust you. I think you're a great guy. You know, I think you got a great product. But I have no need. So now you might say to me, hold on a second, John. You guys are going to develop the leads. You're going to give me a lead and they don't need it? Well, are we a needy people? Do I need carpet on this floor, or could I be standing on cement? Do we need tablecloths on these tables, or could we have the bare wood table? We're not a very needy people. I think need is almost a misnomer today. All right? It's really not as much of a need as it is a want or a desire. All right? But what we're going to do is we're going to take about 15 minutes to talk about how do we develop the need. This is a very, very important part of the presentation. And as you'll see, I spend less and less time as we go across on each portion of the presentation, which should tell you that this is the most important part of it, this is the next important part of it, and so on. All right? What we'll do before we get into developing need, we've been at it for about an hour now. Let's take about a 5-minute break and come on back and we'll talk about how do we establish a need.